Good morning. We saw yesterday that Demas was a deserter and he had forsaken Paul. But Demas wasn't the first to abandon Paul. Early in Paul's ministry, as Paul and Barnabas headed out, in Acts 13, we find out that John Mark, the one who wrote the Gospel of Mark, also left. In fact, it became a bone of contention between Paul and Barnabas later in Acts 15, because Barnabas wanted to take Mark back out to ministry, but Paul felt like he had deserted him and didn't feel like he could entrust ministry to him at that time. There's this fascinating thing at the very end here of Paul's life where we read in verse 11. Luke of 2 Timothy 4, verse 11, Luke alone is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is very useful or helpful to me for ministry. This is a beautiful thing. We saw that the first member of the eclectic battalion was a deserter, but here we have a returning soldier. We have somebody that Paul looks at as someone who went AWOL and now has come back. And Paul is open to the grace of restoration in ministry. And he says here, listen, you know what? We're ready to restore. And Mark has proven himself useful, even though that was a bone of contention in Acts 15, that Paul and Barnabas went different directions. Paul with Silas, Barnabas with Mark. He saw through time that Mark was fit for ministry, and Paul was open to and optimistic enough, even though initially he wasn't sure, he was open to be wrong and to see that this one was helpful for ministry. Here's my encouragement to you. It's simple. Don't give up on people. You know, people may have wronged you. You may have people that proved unfaithful to you. You may have people that have harmed you. You may have people who you just don't trust. And I want to encourage you. I'm not asking you to open your heart blindly to them. But could you be like Paul and say, you know what? Perhaps they could be restored. Perhaps they can be trusted again. Perhaps they could prove faithful to God. Perhaps I could lend myself to them again, and you'd open your heart to them in a renewed way. Sometimes people get slotted, and out of hand we just say, we got nothing to do with them anymore. We can't trust them. And I think I learned something here from Paul, that Jesus can have grace on people, and his hand of grace is never so short that it can't restore. Here Paul is willing. Mark proved himself, and he needed to prove himself, but Paul let him prove himself, and he restored him to ministry. It's a good way for Paul to show that even in the midst of somebody who deserted, he didn't become cynical about people. Instead, the very next verse, he is restoring one and saying he now is helpful to me for ministry. Have that kind of lack of cynicism and optimism and openness to restoration. Have a good day.